The primary school I went to as a kid had quite a big field on which we could go and play during breaks and lunchtime. I thought this was fantastic because I was the sort of kid who just loved to be outside kicking a football around. I could do that all day. But the problem was this field adjoined a farmer's field. It was quite a tall wall-ish, but it was quite possible to climb it, and it was more than possible to kick a football over it. But if that happened, woe betide if you went to get the football without talking to a teacher first. Of course, some lads still did it, didn't they? He had a shot at goal, it flew over the crossbar into the field. Oh, I'm not running all the way back in there to get a teacher to tell them I need to get the ball back. I'll just go. I never did it. I never did it because I saw one or two lads caught by a teacher doing this, and they got in so much trouble. They lost the right, actually, to go out and play football because they were in detention for climbing over the wall. Normally when we see somebody getting punished for something, it puts us off doing it. We think, well, okay, I might want to do that, but do I really want to end up in detention or, as an adult with something more serious, in prison? And yet, in the verse we look at in Philippians this morning, Paul's going to talk about people being emboldened to do something that he did, but that he ended up in prison for. How does that work? Let me read the verse for you. It's from Philippians chapter 1 and verse 14. Most of the brothers have gained confidence in the Lord from my imprisonment, and dare even more to speak the word fearlessly. And now Paul has just mentioned in the previous verse that the whole reason he's in prison is because he's a Christian talking about Christ, telling people they need to come to faith in him. That has landed him in jail. Now you would think that would put the other Christians in the area off when it comes to speaking about Jesus themselves. If it lands you in prison, I ain't going to do it. But actually the opposite is happening. Paul can say that actually most of the Christians around about where he is in prison have now become more bold. Why? How can that possibly make sense? Well, what they're seeing in Paul is that the Lord was with him in his imprisonment. The Lord strengthened him, emboldened him. Paul was not put off from proclaiming the gospel because he was in prison. In fact, what he saw was that because he was in prison, more people were hearing about Jesus than were before. And this emboldened others. We need to learn from that, don't we? It can be so easy to go into our shell when it comes to telling people about Jesus, especially if doing that will get a bit of pushback. One of my heroes that I read about, a Christian when I was younger, was a man called Jim Elliot. He was an American and he decided he wanted to be a missionary along with a group of other guys to a tribe in South America that were relatively unreached but were known for being very violent. And the first time they went to see this tribe, they flew in by airplane, landed beside the river on a strip of land where it was possible to do that, got out the plane and were immediately speared to death. Now reading that might make you think, I don't want to do something like that. I don't want to proclaim Christ, if that's the reaction that could come. But what they did actually inspired countless others to go into Christian ministry, to fearlessly proclaim Christ, to do it in their workplace. Some went back to that tribe in actual fact, and many were wonderfully converted, including some who had been on the beach spearing the initial missionaries that fateful day. What they learned was that having Christ with you fills you with strength. Now, that's wonderful, isn't it? So when you hear of Christians struggling for their faith or in difficult situations, but they're emboldened to speak of Christ, be encouraged to do the same. He is with you. He will help you. He will strengthen you.